political discourse is one of the most important and most prominent forms of discourse, especially in America, especially in this moment. And we've got a political problem, right? A cultural problem politically. We can't really understand each other. We don't know how to talk to each other. And so at this time and leading up to 2024, Facebook and Instagram had sort of distanced themselves from the responsibility of even hosting political discourse. They were downranking news. And that is a disaster when they're the dominant platforms for people's attention, trying to make sense of the world. And then on X, it was almost the opposite. X was overemphasizing political discourse, but putting it into a game where the kind of most sensational and the loudest voices would get the most attention and therefore get to dominate that discourse. And so we think, we saw it's obviously that's a good business opportunity for us when these other places are like failing. There is like an open lane, but also we felt it's kind of like a moral responsibility. Like we have a system that we believe in that is better, and we want it to help foster a better kind of discourse.
Welcome to Anchor Change, where we help you panic responsibly in a chaotic world. I'm Katie Harbath. I've navigated impossible trade-offs in tech, politics, and my personal life for decades. I know that can be lonely. As a Midwesterner who spent 20 years in Silicon Valley and DC, it's taken me a while to figure it out. I still am. One thing that helps me is hearing the stories of other people forging their own paths. Because in a world of complexity, you don't have to navigate it alone. Welcome to Anchor Change. Welcome to Anchor Change. I'm Katie Harbath. Today, we're diving into the newsletter platform that's reshaping journalism, disrupting the media business model, and fueling the next wave of independent voices, Substack. I'm joined by Hamish McKenzie, Substack's co-founder, for a wide-ranging conversation about what it means to build a new kind of media institution, one where the power lies not with the editors or algorithms, but with writers and their communities. We talk about how Substack has become a destination for political discourse and why they leaned into that where others backed away, what the garden era of media means, and how AI could transform, not replace, the creative process. Whether you're a journalist thinking about going independent, a reader rethinking what you pay for, or just someone trying to understand this media moment, this conversation's for you. Please enjoy. Okay, I lied. I have one little thing that I need to tell you all before we get into this conversation with Hamish. So as I was editing, I realized something had happened with my video file for me. And so the beginning part of me welcoming Hamish got cut off. And so you're going to hear us start mid question. I think it makes sense. Like, you're not really missing much, but like, I just don't want you to think that I'm rude by not welcoming him to the show and other things like that. And it kind of feels abrupt that we're just starting right in there, but I couldn't recover it from Riverside, and I figured you all would understand. So now I really hope you enjoy this episode. You have talked about that we're going through a major significant media disruption since maybe the printing press. And that's a pretty big statement. And I'm kind of curious for you, when did you first realize that media wasn't just evolving, but in some ways collapsing and regenerating in real time?
Well, I think we've all been feeling it for a long time. Like, I was in journalism school in 2005.
Okay, I graduated in 2003 from J school, so about the same time.
All right, yeah, nice. And that year, people were worried about like what jobs are we going to go into, because the media was already shrinking and paying as a business, and the internet was the big disruptor. That's what I'm talking about when I say that we're living through the biggest media disruption since the printing press. It's not Substack and it's not social media per se, it's the internet. It has totally upended the way we all communicated with each other. And through social media, we've seen how all the attention has gone to these giant platforms, and we've seen a particular social effect from that. It's been hard to really crystallize what this experience we're all living through is. And at some point, I started to get excited about what I saw emerging on Substack, which was the ability for publishers to have true ownership, but also get the growth effects from an internet scale network, which is small still in comparison to like Facebook, but it's getting there and it's growing fast. And when I saw and felt that combination of things happening, which is relatively recent, even in Substack's history, I think something new is emerging here and it needs to be captured in some way. And I can't remember if there was any one moment. I remember I was conceiving the thesis for this essay, which is called From the Temple to the Garden, which describes this progress in media shifts. And then that formed the basis for a TED talk I gave recently. And through the development of that idea for the essay, I thought I came to realize there's these three distinct phases that we're we've been living through in recent years.
Can you go through those 3 phases? What are they?
Yeah, well, I think the media was, you said you went to J school in 2003, is that right?
Yeah.
So the media world that you and I grew up in was a world that was dominated by newspapers, radio, and television, basically. We had the morning newspaper over breakfast, we had radio for the commutes, and then TV news just before dinner. And it was a relatively stable system. I'm literally just saying my TED Talk right now. It was a relatively stable system, and it was good for protecting standards and quality, but it was not good for representing a very broad range of perspectives or letting new voices in. It was rigid, and it was controlled tightly by gatekeepers. That system was kind of like what I call the temple, and other people have likened it to being like the aristocracy era.
Mm-hmm.
A few rulers with all the power and all the control. And then we've moved into this new era that is dominated by social media. Like, whether you like it or not, most of culture is actually happening on TikTok and Instagram, YouTube, and X to some extent, a few others. And this era is giving everyone a voice, but it's still concentrating power. So the rulers of these platforms are still few in number. And so there's like a few oligarchs, if you like, dominating the system, and everyone gets a voice, but they're mostly, the game they're being forced to play forces them to shout at each other and not really try to understand each other, and in a game to win attention. And I call that the chaos media system. Other people liken that to oligarchy. And then what I see emerging with Substack and Patreon, Twitch to some extent, and some other platforms that are like Supercast that are part of this movement, Ghost, Beehive, is a system that is much more based on distributing the power. So not just distributing the ability to have a voice, but distributing economic power as well, so that an independent voice can also find a way to make enough money to keep doing the work that they find important and that their audience finds important. And that piece, that economic autonomy piece, is critical for the emergence of a new media landscape that really does reorganize society and publishing power in a way that is akin to what the printing press did. And the printing press had these decades of chaos immediately following its arrival, and then it settled into a new type of more democratic distribution of power, and ultimately helped give rise to democracy, or like bolstered democracy, let's say. And this era, which I call the garden, it's much more about the power being distributed among many voices, and many more perspectives can be let in. New voices can be let in. In this current mode, there are no gatekeepers really, but there will be new gatekeepers. There'll just be different sorts and many, many more. And that will give rise to a much more diverse and interesting and rich and valuable system.
And you mentioned, like, what has the growth been like in the last, I mean, it feels like it's really exploded. I don't know if the election was a part of that for you all, or like, where do you feel like you've hit a tipping point in some way with folks coming to Substack and kind of building that garden? I
think there's two things that happened at once, which is there was a ton of interest in the cultural climate around Donald Trump getting inaugurated. And so there's the people who are pro-Trump and then the people who are anti-Trump gathering to like make sense of this current moment on Substack. There was the uncertainty over the TikTok ban, which highlighted the importance of creators owning a direct relationship with their audience so that they're not vulnerable to these platforms. And then there's still some mainstream media mayhem. The Washington Post had a little thing where people were protesting actions that Jeff Bezos was handing down, and the cable TV network has gone through a little flurry here as well. Actually, I think the cable TV's descent has kind of accelerated. The business model problems have caught up on it to the extent that they're now facing the same problems that print media has already gone through. And also the Trump moment has added pressure to that. And so people like Jim Acosta and Joy Reid and Don Lemon are looking for new homes. They're coming to Substack. So all that stuff in the culture is happening at the same time as the network effects from our app are really kicking into high gear. And so the app is anchored by this thing called Notes, which is kind of like it's a discovery and discussion feed that is kind of like Twitter or kind of like Instagram, but with the ads ripped out of it and with the algorithm that ranks all the content in it, not trying to just keep you addicted to a feed, which is what those other places need to do to serve their businesses, but to drive deep relationships that might end up in a paid subscription, because that's how Substack makes money. It's how all the publishers on Substack make money. And even if you don't make money, like the deep relationships, the thing that creates the possibility of one day, maybe later, making money. And so you get this different kind of game. And that feed is reaching critical mass. It's relatively small compared to the other places, but it's new and it's growing fast and it's a different kind of environment to hang out in. So that thing's starting to really work at the same time as these cultural effects. And it's all resulted in this big moment for Substack.
I don't know if I ever told you, but it was when Notes first got released is how I found Sarah Fay, who's one of folks who like helps people on how to use Substack. Yeah. And then through Sarah, I found a Substacker named Kate Hill, who has a writing retreat in France. And I spent 2 weeks at Kate's place in France in February writing my book. And I got connected to all of them through Substack. And then now get to stay connected because then Kate's had other Substackers at her place. And she invited some for a lunch one day, but then I've been following other writers that she's been having. And so then that's been building up its own little community as well. That's kind of all come out of Notes and that discoverability that adds to the writing and the video and everything that folks might be doing.
That's great to hear. I'm glad you had that experience.
And a big thing for you all too, you mentioned a lot of those folks, you mentioned this sort of political moment. I know we talked back in, I think it was July 2023 or something when we first met. What at a time when many platforms were pulling away from politics, you all were leaning into it. You were talking about 2024 being the Substack election. What was your all's thought process in doing that and in deciding to want to kind of lean in on sort of the pundits and the political conversation that was happening?
Well, it's an important conversation and everyone else was abandoning it. And the reason we started Substack was to create a better discourse or help contribute to a better discourse. Like the incentives of social media were pulling everyone along behind them, even the mainstream media, because they also had to conform to the rules of social media to be able to get their audiences. And the incentives of social media in this era when we started Substack was around 2017, were rewarding the types of behavior that drive us apart and cause us to like be doubtful of our neighbors. And it was a system that sort of breeds distrust and doesn't really help us get closer to the truth. And so we wanted to create a different system based on different rules, which is what Substack is, based on these direct relationships and direct subscriptions and the audience as the customer rather than advertisers being the customer. And so political discourse is one of the most important and most prominent forms of discourse, especially in America, especially in this moment. And we've got a political problem, right? A cultural problem politically. We can't really understand each other. We don't know how to talk to each other. And so at this time and leading up to 2024, Facebook and Instagram had sort of distanced themselves from the responsibility of even hosting political discourse. They were downranking news. And that is a disaster when they're the dominant platforms for people's attention, trying to make sense of the world. And then on X, it was almost the opposite. X was overemphasizing political discourse, but putting it into a game where the kind of most sensational and the loudest voices would get the most attention and therefore get to dominate that discourse. And so we think, we saw it's obviously that's a good business opportunity for us when these other places are like failing. There is like an open lane, but also we felt it's kind of like a moral responsibility. Like we have a system that we believe in that is better, and we want it to help foster a better kind of discourse. And so that's what we're 2024 election and doing such a big push there around politics.
And how did you think through the risks? Because I very publicly disagreed with Facebook's pullback from politics, but I'm very biased in that given my work and everything on it. But there's reasons why Facebook and Mark did that. And you all have gotten caught up in some of those where different people have different viewpoints about what these platforms should allow or not allow. That seems to be a risk that you all were willing to take on. Why did you decide that was a risk willing to take on?
Once again, it's important. And I think that we have a better system with a better set of rules, a better game to play for kind of people who are looking to understand the world and understand each other and seek truth. And I think like the problems that have arisen from the last generation, but particularly the last decade, are not to do with how the platforms are managed in terms of content moderation. I think the problems are to do with what are the systems that power those ecosystems? Like what's the game that people are being asked to play? And we've had a generation now of being obsessing about content moderation as a way to try and fix these problems and discourse, and none of them have, like the content moderation mania hasn't really delivered much. Like the discourse hasn't got better. Our fears about misinformation haven't been reduced. Our fears about like conspiracy theories, etc., and like people not understanding each other basically have not been reduced. And I don't think it's like because of evil intent on any of the other players, but it's a natural outcome of the business models that they settled on in the early days of starting these products and starting these social feeds, which are the dominant media products. And what they did is build huge audiences for them, like really giant, billions of people, and then decided that the main monetization engine was going to be advertising, which is fine for many things and does create an amazing system where like awesome stuff can be published and new voices can come through, etc. But it locks you into a particular game when it comes to discourse, because that kind of model inherently doesn't really care about truth. It cares about how long can I keep people stuck on this feed, and then how many advertisements can I show them. And those companies, those platforms are full of geniuses who figured out this game to its maximum extent, which comes with good and bad. But one of the really big downsides of it is that it locks you into an unwinnable discourse game. And what would be better, we thought, was to put people in direct relationships based on subscriptions. Subscriptions are a proxy for trust. And that incentivizes quality. Publishers have to show up and respect the trust and reward the attention of their audiences, not just try and like trick them into scrolling down once more. And the platforms have to do that too. And in this case, our success is totally tied to the publisher's success, and the publisher owns anything and can leave anytime they want, own the mailing list, own the content, can export it anytime they want. So the publisher can only succeed by we, the platform, can only succeed by serving the publisher, and we can only make money when they make money. And the game is not to like foster addiction, but to foster and nourish relationships, which is not to say it's perfect all the time. There's still like some bad stuff, but it's a totally different game and a totally different outcome than those other games.
Yeah, it seems to be a mixture of the design of the platform, because it's not social media like Facebook and everything. I mean, Notes has a feed, but like that design part. But then also because you've taken a very deliberate stance on free speech and pretty strong free speech stance that also, I think, puts a little bit more of the power also in the publisher in terms of the content that's posted both in the comments versus, I mean, you all also take some stands, and I'm curious how do you think about drawing that line about where is it that you as Substack are needing to intervene or say this is not allowed or not allowed versus me as the publisher?
Yeah, when you create a game like this, where the game is nourishing relationships and the publishers and the subscribers have agency. So the subscribers get to vote for the culture that they want to thrive with their attention or with their dollars, with their email addresses in some cases. And then the publishers get to succeed and own all their own content and own their relationship. And then the platform can only succeed when they succeed. When you create that kind of system, then the cultural outcome is so different that the content moderation burden comes down, because it's rewarding different types of behaviors, which means this kind of system can do a much better job of honest to God protecting freedom of expression, which is an incredibly important value, and freedom of press, which is an incredibly important value, especially for journalists, especially from a time like this when there's such like cultural and political tumult. And when we've seen that the other systems have unfortunately frequently arbitrarily wiped out voices that deserve to be heard, whether that's voices like pro-Palestine voices or vaccine skeptics or just people who aren't going along with even if they're not nut jobs, it's better that they feel like they've got a way to say what they need to say and then have them defeated in the public square, rather than have them think that they're like martyrs who have been censored and get a special sort of power from that martyrdom. But we do have content guidelines, and we enforce them in line with the First Amendment. So you cannot incite violence, you cannot spam or dox. The only exception we make is porn. So you can publish porn and be on side with the First Amendment, but if you did that on Substack, you're out. And the reason is we don't want to create specifically a porn platform. It's not part of the discourse. Like sex work is fine, erotic writing, etc. is fine, but porn has its own considerations, even on the technology side. What you need to do is support.
Yeah.
So that we draw a line in there as well.
And you've brought together a pretty good mix of writers, like you said, from across the political spectrum, not only virtually on the platform, where also they're also doing stuff together on the platform, but in person in events. How have you seen that play out? Like, it's, many times I think people look from the outside and feel like these people would never be in a room together or never have dialogue. And that doesn't actually seem to be the case.
Yeah, well, actually, it didn't used to be the case either, right? Like 20 years ago, I had a coffee with Tulsi Gabbard once, and she was saying she used to like talk to her Republican colleagues all the time. She was a Democrat when I talked to her, and they would do morning workout sessions in the gym. And then like at a certain point, when Trump came along, that stopped. The collegiality ended. And so there was there can be basic respect between human beings while having different views of how the world should be run. And they can argue respectfully with each other and help form a more perfect union, et cetera, et cetera. So humans have it within them to be able to do this. And we've done it before. And I see it happening all the time on Substack in the publications and notes, and then in rooms with people at parties together or dinners that we're hosting and that kind of thing. And I don't think people are like trying to create a space that can only be for the blue tribe or the red tribe. I don't think that's helpful for either tribe. And I think we see that with other platforms at the moment. There's certain platforms that have become so sort of ideologically monotone that they're not interesting or useful. And so I think people want it. And I think that they're willing to go there, and that the debate is better if it happens with all parties involved. And that the thing that has made that harder in the past, I keep coming back to this, is just like the systems that have dominated the media system haven't supported it very well. And so this kind of game that we're playing on Substack is much better for that.
Are you seeing it happening globally as well versus just in the US?
The US is by far and away our largest market, and then the UK. Although, yes, we do see it in the UK, we do see it in Canada, we do see it in New Zealand, where I'm from. And maybe people would say, well, you're like small and cute at this stage, and people are still, you're in your honeymoon period. Maybe it's going to change when you get to scale. But I think there's already significant enough scale to see genuine difference in the discourse on this platform, how these people are talking to each other than in those other places.
Have you seen any challenges as Substack has started to scale quickly?
The challenges are mostly on the how do we build this company side, to be honest?
Yeah.
Can we make the product simple and understandable? Is the product working well enough? The feed ranking game is a really hard game to figure out, especially when you're using a new system underneath it. But then how can we hire the right people? What's the right amount of money to spend? What's the right sort of marketing to do? Should we be doing marketing at all? What's the right size of the company? Should we raise money? All these kinds of questions behind the scenes. That's the hard stuff from my perspective. And because a lot of us, I've never been part of building a company before, really. And I've barely been in a company. And then my colleagues were they helped build, Chris and Jiraj, the other two founders, helped build Kick. But they got to a certain stage that Substack has already surpassed, really. And so we're having to learn this game on the fly. And that's really interesting. But on the platform side, the PR storms are always painful as hell, actually. And that's a problem because it affects everyone who works at the company, because they keep on hearing from their uncles and aunties that something weird is happening on Substack.
I know that feeling. The Facebook, yeah. I had to talk to people a lot of times, you're going home for Thanksgiving. Here might be some of the things that your friends and family are going to bring up, and how you might think about working through those.
Yeah, and then you have to be the PR person at home.
Yeah. Can I just have a break?
Exactly. So all that stuff is, but again, the PR storms is kind of it's got that's a brand thing to navigate, but it is also a company operating challenge. It's related to that same thing. So that's the bit I find most challenging.
How are y'all thinking about AI? Whether it's you all using it as part of growing your business, but then also, I don't know if you're thinking about tools at all for authors and stuff. I've been part of a really interesting conversation on Substack about even the use of AI as an author, and whether it should be transparent, use it or not. I think it's a real fascinating one that I'm really excited to continue to have, but wondering how you all are thinking about that too.
Well, I basically think AI offers superpowers for publishers, creators, artists. Yeah. And I use it as a writer. I use it not to write my stuff, but to help me think through ideas, to test metaphors, to structure an essay, to suggest cuts, or if there's a sentence that's giving me trouble, I get stuck on, I might ask for a little bit of help from Claude. So I remember when I was in high school in New Zealand, I was first taught to type on a typewriter. By the time I got to university, there was Microsoft Word had come along, and my poetry teacher in university was telling the class, it's so amazing that you guys get to grow up with Microsoft Word, because you can copy and paste things and delete things really easily, and move things around. And that's such a luxurious tool to have as a writer. And I remember being a little bit mind blown by that, because I just took it for granted already at that point. But then I think the same is true of AI. It's like that transition from typewriter to Microsoft Word, but just times 1,000 or something. And it makes me so much more powerful and fast as a writer. So I can more beautifully express the thing I'm trying to say in the world. And I think it's possible, people take it too far, and I don't actually I think lots of people can sniff when they're reading a piece of AI generated writing. But I think the thing that really matters is the human heart behind it. And if there's a human standing behind this work, there's a human who's saying, this is what I believe and what I think, and this is how I want you to see the world in this particular way. And I think with stories, generally, that is actually what that's the value we derive from them. We're not always looking for the perfect essay or the perfect novel or every sentence just articulated exquisitely. We're looking for human heart and a soul connection. And I think that is not going to go away in the AI dominated era, the AI revolution. In fact, I think that is going to become more prized and more recognized as a valuable thing. And so when you have these human to human relationships in a network like Substack, that is going to be gold. And I think for culture makers, it's an opportunity, and it's going to be easier than ever to be someone who articulates beauty and argues for particular ideas, and it's going to let more voices in. So I'm pretty optimistic on that front. And on the give tools to the publishers through Substack front, we already do it. We just don't label everything as AI.
Yeah.
If we're doing this as a Substack live conversation, you do it from your phone. It's like a public FaceTime call. At the end of that 30-minute call, you just click okay, and then within minutes you're presented with a series of clips that are generated by AI that are the highlights from the conversation, and they have the subtitles baked into them already, and you can hit share and it'll go out to all the social networks. And then there's an artifact of the conversation that lives as essentially like a video podcast that you can just click publish on and from your dashboard, and then that gets touched up with AI on the audio side, at least, and soon to come the video will be touched up and improved through AI. Just AI becomes in this way sort of like a studio for you in the palm of your hand. And I think that is also really exciting. So there's going to be a lot of tumult that comes with the advent of AI, and there's lots of bad shit that goes on and more slop, etc. But there's so much good for culture makers.
And Substack originally started as people writing, and you were talking there too about video and audio. How do you also think about that when I'll speak for myself, I do all three on there, and I'm trying to think about what the right balance is, because I find that they're not just readers, but my community
Audience.
that I've built, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has their own different way that they want to kind of consume this information. And so how are you all just trying to give people tools to do whatever works best for them? Are you finding one video working better than how are you thinking about that?
They all work well and we will support each to an excellent level, because people are not subscribing to video. People are not subscribing to text. They're not subscribing to images or just audio. They're subscribing to a person. There's that soul connection thing I was talking about again. I want to see inside your mind, Katie, or I want to see the world through your eyes. And if you prefer to express yourself in video on this particular day, I'm here for that because I trust you. Or if you want to write a long essay, I'm probably going to read that too. Or, in the future, I can imagine that you might write an essay and I'll be like, I don't want to sit down, or I don't have time to sit down and read this 5,000 word essay. Can you give it to me as a 5-minute podcast? And you click the button that says convert to podcast, and then an AI will actually translate it in that way. Or you can you give this to me as an animated video? And you click the button that says make it an animated video, and I get that as that. And I think that is going to be good for the publishers. But maybe you have to turn off those features if you only want people to read you.
Or how they consume it. If they, I just want them to consume a little bit of it. And so whatever format works best for them, great.
Right. Yeah. Most people just want to be seen, right?
Yeah.
So I'll take being seen in whatever way I can get it. And as a consumer, I love it too, because, frequently this already happens. I don't have time to read something. I'm driving into work or I'm going for a walk or something, but I want to get the contents of that particular post into my mind. And so I'll listen to the narration, which is often done by an AI. Sometimes I love it when it's done by the actual human. But I really appreciate having the ability to do that.
And Substack's also built a lot on the subscription model, which you've talked about. And I've been wondering this a bit too, of subscription fatigue. Are we at a risk of not only subscription fatigue, but then I'm also curious of reader and creator burnout? Because I find even for myself, there's so much stuff I want to consume, but I just don't have enough time in the day to consume everything that I want to. And so I'm having to be really prioritize what it is that I give money to and or read. And so as you all scale more and people are creating more, how are you?
I guess there's two sort of social things that are really important, and then one economic thing that's interesting. The thing that you said just now, that you have to really prioritize what you're going to pay for and what you consume, is a big shift from the behaviors that we would normally have on social media, where we're sort of mindlessly scrolling. And so that intentionality is actually a big important thing to happen, because it makes you consider what you're about to, like how you're feeding your minds, which is how you are in the world often. And so that's a positive step in its own right. Even, maybe it goes too far and it's like, oh no, there's too much good stuff. What do I do now? But I think there was already too much good stuff. It was like just distributed across New York Times, New Yorker, like Twitter, Instagram, blah, blah, blah. And there's way more stuff than we could ever want. And in all the books we never read, all the movies we never catch up with. So having that degree of intentionality is good, and having it all in one place is kind of helpful for like keeping your sanity. So get the Substack app, basically, that's an ad. The other thing that I think is, I don't think that humans have been, let's say it like this. I don't think the market has been appropriately valuing culture. The money that is paid to support great works of literature or filmmaking or arts or like analysis or news or whatever, historically, forever, hundreds of years, has not been enough, given how valuable and important it is in the world that we live in. We're very happy to pay. I paid $3.50 at Starbucks for some like lightly dusted almonds yesterday. And yet I agonize about whether I should pay $5
a month.
To one of my favorite writers. So there's like a useful correction happening on that front as well. Like I think it's like in this model, that culture can be more properly valued and recognized. And then the other part on the economic side, I don't think we're in the end state here for like how this whole system's going to work. For a start, I think we're going to see institutions that emerge on Substack that operate as their own kind of bundles, kind of like Zeteo or the Free Press or Drop Site News or the Ankler or the Bulk. We pay like a certain $100, and that gets you access to like all the writers who are in their company. And then there are going to be opportunities for like new kinds of bundling that might happen from the platform. That's a delicate area to wade into, because what you don't want is to brute force apply a Spotify or Netflix model where people pay the platform and then the platform decides for you what you're going to see and what's worth paying attention to. That's sort of like when you mediate the publisher to audience relationship like that, you start to really break things and become more like those old systems. But if you could do it in such a way where the subscriber still has agency and gets to enter into direct relationships with the publishers, then I think there is a way to like make the bundling work economically so that the platform and the publisher and the subscriber wins. That's very mathematically possible. We haven't started thinking about it seriously, but it's an option for the future.
So when you have a journalist who's maybe loves their beat, but they're kind of scared to leave the infrastructure of the newsroom, or thinking maybe I need to go get another job at a traditional place versus going to Substack, what's your pitch to them about coming to Substack?
I don't try to pitch them all. I think some people just don't want to be entrepreneurial and go independent, and they do prefer a steady, reliable paycheck, even if it's much smaller than what they might get on Substack, or going independent. And the camaraderie of a newsroom is super important to feel like you got your peers and you can share hard times together and celebrate the good times, and access to editors and all that sort of stuff, that sort of stability. So I'm maybe you should join or start one of these publications that are building on Substack in this way, where you get the benefits of the old world, but also the benefits of this growth network that can help you get subscribers and that's kind of discovery you might otherwise only get from social media. And then otherwise I sort of focus more on the people who really are convinced they want to do it, that this is they recognize the benefits of a newsroom, but they also see an exciting life for themselves, building something about, independently. And maybe they end up growing it. Maybe they end up hiring people and starting to build a newsroom themselves. And that's one of my favorite things to see happen on Substack. But I think there's going to be, again, I think we're in the early days here. I think there are going to be entirely new institutions built on this platform, or on models like this, at least. It doesn't have to be Substack. And that is going to give people some options. And there's going to be some newsrooms you can join, and there's going to be some go out on your own ventures that people can embark on.
Yeah, I kind of find it exciting of trying to think about what there's so many different options of what these models could look like and haven't even been thought about yet, that we're just, I just think 5 years from now, it's going to look completely different in a way that we didn't necessarily expect it.
100%. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm very optimistic about this. If I weren't one of the founders of Substack, I would be looking at Substack thinking, this is super cool and interesting, because the way I see it is it's new land to build on, and anyone gets an opportunity to build on that land. You can build the next media products based on this new land with this new different rules from the old one and like new advantages, and it's all fresh. It's like, the snow hasn't been deeply trodden yet. So I think there's hugely exciting things to come.
Now, I want to shift a little bit to your own story, because you mentioned you started off as a journalist. What was your path from journalist to co-founder, and how did you kind of think about those pivots, and how did you try to approach some of them?
From high school, I wanted to be a journalist. I thought it would be the best job to do. I still believe it is. And I worked at the student newspaper, edited it, went to do a journalism degree, post-grad, and then ended up working in magazines in Hong Kong, and then came to the US because I had an American girlfriend who I later on married and have 2 children with. Came as a freelancer because that was one of the ways I could get a visa. Loved the freelance life. Wasn't eager to leave it. And then wrote this thing about how I think the future of magazines should look a lot more like Spotify, which I've since evolved my thinking on, but I was sort of thinking about like a platform for news in those days. And then got offered a job off the back of that piece at this publication called Pando Daily, which was a tech news site that spun out of TechCrunch 12 years ago, something like that, 13 years ago. And then through my work there, ended up through roundabout ways getting offered to work. Elon Musk offered me a job at Tesla as lead writer. So I took that job, had an amazing experience there. But that was like one of the few reasons I would have left journalism, to go and like work in a crazily interesting company at a crazily interesting time, like Tesla in 2014, for a crazily interesting historical figure, Elon Musk. Got there, had an amazing experience, but it's full of all the ups and downs you might expect from an Elon Musk company. Decided I wanted to go back to writing, went and worked on a book. And while I was like writing that book, which is about how Tesla catalyzed the electric car revolution, I was working at a part-time job with a messaging app company called Kik, which had hundreds of millions of users at that point. And I'd become friends with the CEO and the lovely guys from Canada who are like the opposite culturally to that Tesla culture, which is everyone gets thrown under the bus culture. And I was also a big believer in WeChat, which is the massive messaging app in China, which is the biggest consumer app in the world. And I thought Kik had the only chance, or the best chance, of the messaging apps in the West to do the WeChat thing. And they got an investment. While I was there, they got invested in by Tencent. So it was a crazily interesting time to be there. But by the time I finished writing the book, Chris had finished working at Kik as well. And Chris is the CEO of Substack, my co-founder. Raj is the CTO of Substack, he's co-founder. And those guys are both at Kik. In 2017, Chris had stepped away from Kik, was thinking about, what's he going to do next? And he was writing some things down, wrote a blog post that he shared with me for my feedback. I had finished at Kik at that point as well and finished my book. So we just both happened to be around and available and interested in these media topics. And his blog post that he shared with me was decrying the incentives of the social media system and what it had wrought. And my feedback was, okay, this is all right. Like everyone who works in the media knows that these are the problems, but no one knows what the solution is. So if you're going to like finish this blog post, add a couple of paragraphs about what might be better. And then he didn't finish the blog post because it just led to this conversation that ended up in us starting Substack.
How did you come up with the name Substack?
That's one of the first times I've ever been asked. Chris and I were batting around a bunch of names that started with sub that we could get the .com for. And actually, I got really excited about Monograph in the meantime because kind of like highfalutin but a bit mathy and also writerly. And we decided, okay, we're going to try and get Monograph. And so this took a couple of days, this argument, and where I finally won Chris over. And we went to buy it and someone else had taken it in the meantime. So we're like, okay, we'll go to our second choice, which we're also fine and happy with, which is Substack. Yeah, Chris had come up with like Subwit and Submix, all these strange names that didn't make any sense. And I suggested Substack because it's kind of like a stack of your subscriptions or the stack for subscription publishing. And we could get the .com for like $2,000. And so we did that.
Sometimes it's the simplest, like naming is such a hard thing. Like it's like mainly, like you said, is the domain free? You start and then you're like, you just got to pick something and go with it.
Is it affordable? Is it like, and then, does it kind of make some sense? And then is it not going to be mocked too much? And then, so we don't get mocked too much. The name, like the jokes that people make are relatively anodyne. There's like, oh, it's like a stack of Subway sandwiches, or the existence of Substack implies the existence of DomStack. Those are the only two
But did you ever imagine it turn into a verb like Google? Like it's a verb now. Like people say, like, I'm going to, like, you should Substack. Like it's a shorthand now for, starting a newsletter.
Yeah, no, we had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea that the company was going to succeed beyond us registering the domain name. So it's all very happy coincidence.
How are you thinking about the next 5 years? I mean, so much is going to change. How are you thinking about how you want to show up and sort of the culture you're wanting to build?
For Substack.
Or yourself, like your role in that. Like it's, there are two distinct things that they're intertwined.
Yeah. The self thing is that's a more complicated question.
Fair.
Well, maybe I can synthesize it. I see myself as trying to tell the story of Substack to the world, what our mission is, what our values are, why this system and this kind of game is different. And it's a hard thing to do, right? Because people are indexed on something else. They have a mental model of social media that they apply to Substack, even though it's totally different. So we're trying to get people to think about media and social media in a different way. So that's a story to tell that we've been telling for 7.5 years, and we'll keep telling for the next 5 years as Substack becomes more understood as an app, a place that people hang out in, which is good for the publishers because that means more people will subscribe to your stuff, and all the app users are more likely to pay for stuff as well, and they pay more for per subscription, or they're willing to pay more. I think in the next 5 years the cultural tumult will continue for a little bit, and the AI revolution is going to contribute to that. And so being a place where it's a network of human to human relationships that is built on trust, as much as you can make a proxy for trust in the economic sense, subscriptions is about as good as you can get, I think. Has some imperfections, but it's as good as you can get. I think we have a role to play to be here's the place where you can come for your trusted relationships, to make sense of the chaos, and to get really good media and culture that helps improves your lives. And then for the people who are making that media and making that culture, sharing that culture, here's a place where you can have ownership. You can rely on and trust this platform in the way that you might not be able to in the other places. And you have a chance, and not everyone gets to, but you have a chance to make meaningful income that can support the work that you find meaningful. So that's a big game to try and play. We'll keep trying to play that way.
Well, I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've had a ton of fun with this conversation.
Thanks. Yeah, awesome questions. And thanks for publishing on Substack.
That was Hamish McKenzie, the co-founder of Substack. And I hope you're walking away with a deeper understanding of not just Substack, but the seismic shifts underway in how we inform, persuade, and connect. Here are 3 takeaways I'm sitting with. 1, Substack isn't just a publishing tool. It's a reimagining of trust. By putting relationships, not algorithms or advertisers, at the center, it flips the old media model on its head. 2, politics is part of the platform's DNA. Whereas other companies were shying away or backing from those hard conversations, Substack leaned in and created a space for diverse and sometimes controversial voices to coexist. AI is changing the creative process, but not replacing it. Hamish frames it as moving from the typewriter to Microsoft Word to a studio in your pocket. It's a powerful reframe for creators who are navigating what's next. I really appreciate you all listening. I got one more thing. As many of you know, my mantra is to panic responsibly, and I've been working on some new designs for the merch shop, and this summer I decided to have some fun. When the world starts spinning, what kind of panicker are you? Are you a chaos theorist, a soft alarmist, maybe a shadow sage? And I've created a quick and fun quiz at panicresponsibly.com to help you figure out your panic persona. Because let's be honest, we're all trying to hold it together in our own beautifully weird way. Plus, here's the twist. I'm using the quiz results to decide which designs get dropped first in the new merch store. So if you want to make your persona into print, cast your vote with your vibe. Head to panicresponsibly.com, take the quiz, and maybe pick up a tea while you're at it. It's merch for the self-aware, emotional support content, if you will. I gotta do it again. That was Hamish McKenzie, and I hope you're walking away with a deeper understanding, not just of Substack, but the seismic shifts underway in how we inform, persuade, and connect. Here are 3 takeaways that I'm sitting with. 1, Substack isn't just a publishing tool. It's a reimagining of trust. By putting relationships, not algorithms or advertisers, at the center, it flips the old media model on its head. Politics is part of the platform's DNA. While others have backed away from hard conversations, Substack leaned in, creating a space for diverse, sometimes controversial voices to coexist. And 3, AI is changing the creative process, but not replacing it. Hamish frames it as moving from the typewriter to Microsoft Word to a studio in your pocket. It's a powerful reframe for creators who are navigating what's next. I really appreciate you listening. And I've got one more thing. As many of you know, my mantra is to panic responsibly, and I've been working on some new designs for the merch store. And this summer, I decided to have some fun. When the world starts spinning, what kind of panicker are you? Are you a chaos theorist, maybe a soft alarmist, or a shadow sage? I've created a quick and fun quiz at panicrisponsibly.com to help you figure out your panic persona. Because let's be honest, we're all trying to hold it together in our own beautifully weird way. Plus, here's the twist. I'm using the quiz results to decide which designs get dropped first in the new Panic Responsibly merch line. So if you want to make your persona to be first in print, cast your vote with your vibe. Head to panicrisponsibly.com, take the quiz, and maybe pick up a tea while you're at it. It's merch for the self-aware, emotional support cotton, if you will. Please like and share if you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you next time.